I'm going to be taking us all the way back to kindergarten to start this one off. Elementary school in general, I just remember was a lot about lining up, going places, staying together. And it makes sense because, several tiny humans, you want to make sure that they're all together and safe. But lining up for us was a competition. It was a race. Who could be the first person? The first person was secretly the best person, even though we always had a saying. So if the first person was first and they were boasting a little bit like, hey, look at me, I'm the first person, I must be the best, like I'm so cool, I got here first. Too fast for you guys. We would always be like, well, remember that saying, first is the worst, second is the best, and third is the one with the treasure chest. And to me now, looking back, the third person seems like they kind of get the better deal. They get a treasure chest. So I'm not sure if there's stuff in it, but we can only just hope and assume that there is. So we had this mentality of to be the best person, you had to be the first person. And today in our text that we're going to be looking at, we're going to see if that's true or not. Jesus addresses that directly. To be the best person, do you need to be first, second, third, fourth, fifth, or last? And so we're going to figure that out in our text today. And so we are going to be looking at Mark 9:33 through 37. And it says, they came to Capernaum. When he was in the house, he asked them, what were you arguing about on the road? But they kept quiet because on the way they had argued about who was the greatest. So they were kind of a little bit ashamed by that. They're like, are you going to tell them why we were arguing? Because now it kind of seems stupid. So my first point for you guys today is that pride causes competition. In the verses prior, Jesus just gives this very small teaching to just the disciples alone. He made sure that it wasn't like a public thing. He just wanted to be talking to the disciples. And this was a prediction of his death, his burial, and his resurrection. And they were a little confused, as it makes sense. They were just freaked out, and they had questions about it, but it says that they were too afraid to ask. So as they were walking to Capernaum, they just started arguing about who is the greatest, like who is the top ranked disciple, who's the top dog, who's the most holy, the most righteous person, who's Jesus' BFF, and it was just this little competition. They weren't sprinting or anything. It wasn't that kind of noticeable competition, but in your minds when you have 12 people that are equally as close to Jesus, you are thinking hey, where do I stand with Jesus? 1 out of 12, let me know. And so this kind of reminds me of a story. So The Lion King, there's a new one that came out. I haven't seen it yet, honestly, but I really want to. I'm super excited. But this same week that it came out, I got the opportunity to watch the old version, which brought back so much nostalgia for me. But yeah, so loved it. There was this scene that I remember, and so Mufasa had just, taken Simba around. Everything that the light touches is the kingdom, and that will be yours because you'll be king one day. And Simba gets a little puffed up by this, and he's like, well, he goes to his Uncle Scar, and he's like, well, my dad showed me that, the kingdom and how everything's going to be mine because I'm going to be king and all that kind of stuff. And Scar's like, yeah, whatever. So Scar sets him up to go to this elephant graveyard, which basically, the hyenas were supposed to eat them, and that was supposed to be the end of that. And that's not how that obviously turned out. So Simba, trying to be this macho little tiny king that he was, he dragged his friend Nala around and tried to kind of show off a little bit, I'm not afraid of anything. And so when it came to the hyenas, he tries to let out this, growl and this, big roar, and it was just this puny little pathetic, and so Mufasa comes to the rescue, thankfully, and he scares off the hyenas. But when he takes them home, he makes Nala go home, and he has this talk with his son, and it basically, Simba was just like, Dad, I just wanted to be brave like you. And Mufasa's like, I don't go looking for trouble to be brave. I only have to be brave when I'm in those situations. Like I don't have to go looking for it. Like it's not one of those kinds of situations. Someone just kind of got it a little bit wrong there. He's just getting information about being king, and that might have just gotten to his head, and might have just gotten a different view of what being a king was really like and how they were supposed to act. So his father quickly let him know that's just not how you demonstrate bravery. And I love that he did that so gently. And Jesus also had quickly just let the disciples know that's not how you demonstrated greatness. So we're going to pick up here in verse 35 where it says, "Sitting down, Jesus called the 12 and said, 'Anyone who wants to be first must be the very last and the servant of all.'" So my second point for you today is, last is best. That is the secret sauce. That is the answer we've been waiting for. Is first the worst? Is second the best? No, last is the best. If you want to be the greatest of all, you're going to have to be last. And in that, there's kind of this pruning that happens, because being last means a servant, and you can't have a servant's heart necessarily by with your motivations just solely wanting to be great. So it kind of, you become great because you become less, and Jesus becomes more. And so I love that Jesus chose to address this while they were close and together and not on the road or not right away. And he wanted to make sure that everybody, whether they were involved in the argument or not, they heard this teaching that this is truly the greatest way. And the goal was not to be great. The goal was to be a servant. And I love that Jesus just sets the record straight. He just spells it out like, this is what you need to do. Like, this is what you guys were asking. This is my answer to it. And sometimes we can, look at these texts and be like, what the heck, Jesus? That doesn't make sense. Like, you're talking riddles to me here. I don't understand. But what he is just saying here is that this is the life we are to live, a life of servanthood. And that is what's going to be best in the eyes of God. Not how many Bible verses we memorize, though impressive. Not how much knowledge that you know about the Bible or about theology and stuff like that. Not even about how strictly you live your Christian lifestyle. Those things are important, don't get me wrong. Those things are awesome and important. But those are the things that aren't going to make you the greatest. Jesus demonstrated servanthood many times, just all the times, performing miracles while he was still grieving over the loss of a friend, washing the disciples' feet, eating and talking with sinners, and the biggest example of all that we see Jesus demonstrating here is the cross. We see that in the garden before he went and was betrayed, we see Jesus having a moment before the Lord, and before he gets turned in, and he says, "Lord, would you take this cup away from me?" This was such an honest and raw moment for him, where that was the humanity in him. God, I know I'm supposed to be doing this, but is there another way out? Because I'm doing the math here, and that's a lot of pain, and I have to die. So can this happen a different way? But when the answer was no, there's not. I can't take this cup from you. Jesus chose to put everybody first and keep himself last. He was the greatest servant of all. He died for the people that didn't know him. He died for the people that put him on the cross. He died for the people that did know him. He died for the sinners. He died for everybody. And I think that is such a great example that we ought to live by. And so that brings me to my last point. Jesus came to save the lost and the meek. So we're going to finish the passage off with this. He took a little child whom he placed among them. Taking the child in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but the one who sent me." So I know that sounds a little bit riddle-ish here again, but he's just saying whoever welcomes the least of these is not just in welcoming myself, but they're welcoming God the Father. There's verses that saying, a passage of, because you clothe them, you're not just clothing them, you clothe me. And in turn, you're serving the one who sent me. So it's kind of this notion that when you interact, when you take care of, when you love on the least of these, you are in turn loving on God, because you're loving on his creation. You are doing the exact thing that you were designed to do, and Jesus sets that example. He sets that standard. Jesus died so that everybody has the opportunity, no matter who you are, no matter how much of a hot mess you are, so that you have the opportunity to accept him, to hear the gospel, to have that relationship with him. And so I love that he just is giving us this great example that it's not the goal, again, as I said before, it's not the goal to be great. The goal is how we treat one another. If we let our pride get in the way, we might never interact with people that are dying to hear the gospel, or that are dying to have just one shred of love and light. All because we don't maybe like how someone looks or the way they act, or we think they're weird. We might be denying them of that interaction. And so this is just a heart check situation. We all know that one person in our office, in our lunch areas. We know those people that maybe aren't the most popular, that aren't the most loved, that aren't the most, normal to our standards. But those are the people that Jesus died for. How are we any better to stop killing? We can't just not communicate with them or interact with them because we think that we're better, because we are not. Those are the very same people that Jesus came to interact with. Those are the very same people that Jesus came to die for. And so how much more should we interact with those people? How much more should we talk to those people, love on those people, befriend those people? Jesus set that standard. And I'm going to leave off with this story. I have a friend. She goes into Walmart one day. She's with her 3 kids. She wants to get in and out. She sees this guy on a bench. She feels this little nudge from God. Just ask him, how are you? She says, no, God, I have lots to do today. And she goes on her way. She shops. And by the time she comes out, he is still there. And she's like, fine, I will just ask him. She asks him, how are you? And he breaks down in tears because he had lost his job. His car broke down. He was new. He didn't know anybody. And it was his birthday week. And so all of this stuff was just going wrong. Worst week of his life. And it was just a moment. It wasn't a permanent fix. Nothing that she could say or do could fix all that was happening in his life. But she had the opportunity to sit there and pray with him and encourage him. And we won't ever get to see that side of eternity, that side of that conversation. But we know that God can work through those prayers. God can work through the encouraging words. And I can only imagine how much that had touched that man. And so I want to encourage you today to put that in practice. Instead of, being the first person to walk through a door, open the door for someone else. If you see someone with less groceries than you, let them skip ahead of you if you have an entire Costco cart ready to check out. Be the last. Figure out ways where you can be a servant in your workplace, in your school, in your family, your own household. I would encourage you guys. Humbling is going to be hard. Humbling yourself does not feel good. It's going to feel weird in some moments, putting others before yourself, because instinctually we want to be first. And again, it doesn't feel good sometimes. But the more you do it, the better it gets. And it's not about the feeling. It's about being the servant. So there you have it. You have the recipe. If you want to be the best person, you want to be the greatest person of all, you need to be a servant. You need to be humble. And Jesus is the best example of that. Thank you so much for listening.